something's happening that I've never experienced, and fate is closing in on me. This is a common thing with Lyme disease. You become a miserable person to be around because you're sick all the time. It affects your mood. And my wife and I had a really bad argument one night, and so I went to another bedroom, not to, I'm sleeping alone tonight, So I laid down on the bed and I started having another heart attack. And I thought, you know what? Good, you know, Lord, take me now. Let's. I've had a good run. I'm doing all that. I've had a good life. I'm ready to go. This is when the spiritual stuff started to happen. I think my guides realized, okay, he's let go of everything. He's ready now for the spiritual awakening.
I'd like to welcome everybody back to another episode of Soul Inspired. Today I'm here with Gregg Kirk. Gregg Kirk is an energy healer. He's also a musician. He's dealt with some health-related ailments in the past, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And he also is an author. So first of all, thanks, Gregg. As we were talking before you came on, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And from what I understand, like I'd mentioned before, I had Wendy on an earlier episode, and she was awesome, really great person to talk to. And but you run a podcast with her, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, it's called Waking Up Spiritually. And it's kind of a strange thing. So Wendy and I have never met in person. She's in Seattle, I'm in Connecticut. And we connected in a roundabout way through other friends on Facebook. And I was looking to do a podcast about 4 or 5 years ago. And, it's one of those things where I didn't say anything to anyone, and she reached out to me. So this, we were just mild acquaintances at that point. She said, "Would you like to do a podcast with me?" And I said, "Yes, let's do it." So her background is past life regression through hypnotism, and mine is, well, we'll get into it. Mine's a wild and crazy story of somebody kind of minding their own business, and then the spiritual awakening descended on them through all these seeming tragedies and so forth. But anyway, so Wendy and I have been doing the podcast as Waking Up Spiritually. We have a website, wakingupspiritually.com. You can see all the episodes, and it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I remember when I talked to Wendy, and she had mentioned what she was doing on the podcast side of things, and just kind of finding out her story.
Yeah.
Just was fascinating. I remember half the time I was just sitting there with my mouth open, like, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. I'm very fortunate that I get to talk to so many people who've gone down spiritual paths. And speaking with that, one of the first questions I ask everybody is if you can paint a picture a little bit of who Gregg Kirk was, what your life was like before this transition on the path you're on now. Was there a kind of a certain time when this happened? I mean, it sounds like a number of things may have occurred, but if you can think of that moment, what was your life like before that happened?
Yeah. So, a musician who had gotten signed to a speculative deal through A&M Records back in 1996 with the band I was in called Shovelhead. Um, so a musician, a grunge musician of the late 90s, loud music, angry music. And then met my soon-to-be wife during that period of time. We moved to, anyway, the record deal fell through, which was very disappointing. But happens back then, it happened all the time. And then, so I needed to get a job, and I did, and I parlayed a career of internet. So back in the dawn of the internet, 1999, actually 1997 through 99, I was a web developer, what we used to call a webmaster, and then I got into content. So that was fun, and then I got recruited. So I was living in the Philadelphia area, and then transitioned up to Connecticut, and then my wife Tracy and we got married, had a child, bought and sold a house. We had a child and bought and sold a house in the same month, and this stress brought something out, some sort of symptoms I didn't know what they were. And so anyway, so I to paint a brief picture, I was this rock and roll guy um, who became a family man. And it's so ironic. I'm literally writing a song now called Family Man about this story. So
Wow.
um, that transition into family life was jarring to me, extremely stressful. I started working a corporate job, which was not, I certainly wasn't cut out for it, but I did the best I could. Um, I I continued writing music in the background, but I basically focused on making money, providing a home for my family. And in that period of time, symptoms started happening to me where I would eat a meal and then I feel like I was on drugs. I would have to lay down, take a nap in the middle of the day. It's like all these strange symptoms that didn't line up with anything that now I understand are the symptoms of Lyme disease. And these are not even classic symptoms of Lyme disease. So I live in Connecticut where they discovered it. And but none of my doctors thought about testing me for Lyme disease. And then the tests for Lyme disease are actually as much as 60% inaccurate. So
Wow.
I went for 2 years not knowing what was wrong with me. And I'm supposed to be enjoying my child and the new house I'm in and all this, which so I was having a really, really bad time. And then it got worse. I got on antibiotics for 6 years and my health declined to the point where I was dying. And that's when the spiritual stuff started happening to me. Wendy and I have this term of shake you to wake you, and that I
Right.
was going through the shake you to wake you up. I was very much trying to be a family guy, very much trying to be a good American citizen, all this stuff. And it wasn't working out at all. The American dream was a nightmare for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'll jump in for a second there. So really fascinating stuff. So see, and this is why I wanted to talk to you in person, and I'm really excited to hear your story because there are things I can relate to that in being that when you're a musician, you're an artist, you're a creative person, and you're allowing your you know this internal creativity to come outward all the time, and then you go from that to working for someone else to be able to bring home a paycheck to support your family.
yeah,
That can be a massive switch. And I guarantee you, I mean, this happens all the time. You hear about artists that get big and something goes wrong, and they kind of lose steam and they have to go work in the real world, and then they fall. They
it'd
just
be
keep falling.
humiliating. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a big shift. So that's what basically happened to you. You were a creative musician, um, trying to make it in the music world, which I can relate to as a musician,
Yeah.
and then you go and try to be this family man, and you come down with this disease, or ailment. I don't know what you would call it, because you can overcome Lyme, right? But
It's not easy.
it's
Yeah.
not easy. I mean, did you say it was 6 years?
Yeah. All told, 12 years.
Wow.
Almost died. So I was on antibiotics for 6 years. So that to most people, that probably doesn't sound right. Like, why would you stay on antibiotics for 6 years? But all the doctors I was seeing would tell me, stay on antibiotics until you feel better. So, I'm trying to be a good patient. I'm like, all right. But, and the confusing thing was if I was off antibiotics and then I went on them, it kept me from dying. So it kept me from dying, but then, so I would only feel 5 to 10% better. And then the longer I stayed on them, it would start to impact my intestinal tract, which is where the seat of your immune system is. And then I would start to get all these other illnesses. Anything my daughter picked up at preschool or elementary school, I got it.
Wow.
And so I was just in this miserable state of barely hanging on, barely able to go to work. And some days I couldn't. And then the pivotal point was when I just thought, listen, if antibiotics are going to do it for me, why don't I just do the nuclear option, which is something called a PICC line. It stands for, I won't tell you, look it up. It's PICC, it's peripheral intravenous something, something, something. The idea, and I was so dumb at the time. I'm like, I want to get intravenous antibiotics because if this is a bacteria, I want to disinfect my body, which is not how you get rid of Lyme disease. But what did I know? they inserted this thing. I didn't realize I had to go to a hospital and get it installed, through this surgery. So when I walked into an operating room stunned, like, this is what is involved. And they laid me out on the table. It was like crucifixion. Like, I had my arms at the side, and they had a X-ray over me, and so they insert a line into the large vein in your bicep, and then run it up to your aorta, and they jabbed my heart and almost killed me. Yeah, so, that wasn't good. They didn't understand what was going on. They kept me in the hospital out in the hallway to make sure I wouldn't die. They gave me lunch, and then they're like, "Well, you seem okay, so go home." So I drove home, and then that night, so this line is it's installed. They sewed it to my skin. It looked like an arrow wound. So the thing about PICC lines is you can never let it completely heal, because the line will heal. Your skin wants to heal over it. Anyway, went all the way in, and it was jabbing my heart. That night I laid on my side, which I usually sleep on my side, and it went into my heart. So it woke me up. I had what is called, well, it's like a heart attack. It I found about all this later. So there is a nerve patch in your heart called the sinusoidal node, NODE. It's your heart's internal pacemaker. That got jabbed. So my heart didn't know what to do. And I thought I was going to die. So I didn't wake up my wife. I'm like, I don't want to bother her. I went downstairs, laid on the couch, and laid there. And there was the hospital had an emergency line that didn't open until 7 a.m. So I laid there wondering if I would die. Just to add even more pressure to the situation, I had scheduled a presentation I was supposed to give to the corporate officers at my job, not the officers, but the high-level VPs. I was supposed to prepare for, and I didn't call anyone. I didn't go into work. It was a pivotal moment for me of just letting go of everything. I called the emergency line. The doctor there said, "Wow, I'm so sorry. That sounds really awful." And he goes, "But here's the weird thing. You haven't tried the antibiotics yet. So it sounds like you've been through the worst of it. Can you just tough it out?" I'm like, "Sure, let me try this."
I
Done.
mean, you're a walking dead man right now anyway, it seems like. So why not?
Might as well go all the way. So
Right, right.
I did, and it had all the positive effects it had on me happened in the first week, but it was more trouble than it was worth. A nurse had to come to my house once a week
Yeah.
and clean the line, and clean it out. And then it was over a holiday or something, so they had somebody who hadn't been a nurse in a while. So my regular nurse came in, and she broke the line. And I'm like, "All right, well, they can probably repair this." She's like, "I don't think they can." So I had to get it reinserted. I had to go through the experience
Oh
again.
my goodness.
Anyway, so that it was, so at this point, I'm like, what have I done to deserve this? What's going on here? I seem to be, something's happening that I've never experienced, and fate is closing in on me. And what's going on? So I don't know. After things kind of settled down, um, this is a common thing with Lyme disease. You become a miserable person to be around because you're sick all the time. It affects your mood. You want to die, but you don't want to commit suicide, kind of thing. And my wife and I had a really bad argument one night, and so I went to another bedroom. Not to, I'm sleeping alone tonight. So I laid down on the bed, and I started having another heart attack. And I thought, you know what? Good. You know, Lord, take me now. Let's. I've had a good run. I'm doing all that. I've had a good life. I'm ready to go. And the funny thing is, I didn't die. So this is, so Wendy's had, my podcast co-host has had a full-on, near-death experience where she did die and she
Right.
left her. I didn't quite get there. I got to the doorstep. I was ready. I was ready for it, but it didn't happen. But this is when the spiritual stuff started to happen. I think my guides realized, okay, he's let go of everything. He's ready now for the spiritual awakening. Because, what I've learned at this point is you've got to be unencumbered, unattached to anything in your life for you to really be able to have an ascension process. So I was there. I was very, and I like, I wish it were because I was a wise man and figured this out. No, I stumbled, I fell off the cliff, and it happened. But yeah, within 3 days, I started having all these amazing spiritual encounters, completely unannounced. For instance, just a strange thing happened where I was 3 days after this. I was listening to a radio show and I heard this guy doing spiritual healing on like a shock jock talk radio show. Like, what's this guy doing? And he's getting heckled by the people. You're a fake. And then what he would do is he would turn it around. So the people, calling in and heckling him, he would say, "Oh, how long has your mother been dead?" And they would, shut them up. And he would give a message from their mother, and they would, instantly convert these people. I was astounded by this. And then, during the commercial portions, they said, you can have a session with this guy. So I thought, what have I got to lose? It was very expensive over the phone. This guy did so we set it up, and I did a session with this guy, not really expecting much. But I would have to say it changed my life at that time because the depression I'd felt for a couple of years. One of the first things he said was, you have all these attachments on you. Your guides are coming in. They're happy, and they're telling me. And he said something. So he's like talking to my guides and talking to me on the phone, and he said something offhand like, "He's more special than you know." I said, "Who is?" He said, "Oh, they're telling me you're more special than I know." I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "You're like 1 in 10 people in the world. You're going to be doing this. You're going to write a book. You're going to do all these things." And I really didn't care at that period of time because I wasn't interested in anything spiritual. I was more concerned about healing.
Mhm.
And the thing is, my vision started to change during this conversation. My depression went away. I started to have physical positive reactions to this. So I could feel the stuff happening. And so I was reacting to that. I wasn't really reacting to the stuff he was kind of telling me I was going to do in the future, and that I was this, special person, you know.
Right.
But when it ended, he said, "I just want to tell you, you're going to do this stuff in the future. You're going to write a book, and you're going to, he goes, you're going to fight the good fight and do all this stuff." So I said, "All right, well, great. Thank you. See you later."
Mhm.
And then, more stuff happened. It didn't completely heal me, and I had to go through more physical stuff. And over the course of the next couple of years, I went to Brazil to see a healer named John of God. So I just want to say right there that the experience I had down there was real. I physically, I took a before and after pictures. My physical appearance changed from this experience
Hmm.
to make things extremely confusing. John of God is in jail for molesting women. So
Oh,
I
no.
didn't see any of that going on. I don't condone that part of who he is, but I will have to say that I did have real experiences, as have had hundreds of thousands of people. So anyway, I went through that. So anyway, all of this is documented in my book, The Gratitude Curve, that I wrote and released in 2017. But so that was my rocky start to spirituality. After these physical things settled down, after I had my experiences in Brazil, what I would go down there for 2 weeks at a time, out in the middle of nowhere, and it still is to this day a supernatural place where it's the veil is very thin there. And as somebody who's been trained in energy healing all the way back in 1997, I walked, as soon as I set foot on that place, like goosebumps, and I started feeling energy shift, and I could tell, wow, I'm in the right place.
Hmm.
And the healing that took place down there didn't have anything to do with John of God per se, but the entities that were there. So I met my soul team, or whatever you want to call it, my angelic guides. I felt their presence deeply. Um, Physical changes started happening, just miracles. And after that, yeah, I was a pretty changed person. I came back and went back to my life, the corporate world and my family man situation. And it was like, okay, I don't have to get rid of all this stuff if I don't want to, but maybe I can bring new light to this, you know? So that's one of the things I asked this energy healer. And then of course I met some other people who helped kind of tutor me, and I asked them, like, why am I in this strange situation where I just had this amazing experience? I feel like a lighthouse. And they're like, you are. You're a lighthouse. You're in a place where just your presence is helping people. And I'm like, come on, you know, I'm not that special. I'm not like this avatar where I walk into a room and people change. They're like, well, in okay, you can think whatever you want, and you're not an avatar, but well, we all are actually, but your your vibration is different than theirs, and you don't even have to say anything. And this is there's a lot of people like this where you go into a room and you just be, and that is what you're there to do. I'm like, okay, so it was, you know, something for me to think about and work on. And you know, ego work is a big deal in this situation where you have to understand that you're part of everybody, but you're what everybody's on their own kind of trajectory, you know, their own kind of timeline. And it took years for me to understand that. So anyway, I got let go from that company back in 2014, and then I started helping people with Lyme disease through energy healing and herbal treatments. I met Wendy. We started doing a podcast. I do online group healing circles. I do these in-person circles. We do fire circles in Connecticut. We do healing circles in salt caves, and and so I went from being a corporate guy to whatever I am now. I don't know what you call me, but
Thanks for sharing it's probably a very condensed version of what you went through. And
yeah,
it's listening to it, I have a lot of empathy towards what you had to go through. I can't believe you had to go through that twice when you were going through the actual injection
yeah,
part of what you were going through. That's incredible. You said a few things that I just wanted to touch on.
yeah,
Um, so well, we are different, you and I, and we've just met, but I was corporate world, then musician and teacher, and now very much in this spiritual realm of things. Still musician, but I feel a very strong pull. And this is why I'm sitting here with you. So, a little backwards from you because you went musician to corporate to healing, and now you brought back the musician because once you're, as you know, you can't get rid of that part of who we are.
exactly.
And we can dive into that a little bit, but
Yeah,
a few things. One of the things that really stood out that you said is that you have to be 100% unattached to really become aware of your spiritual nature, your trueness of who we are at our core. I agree with that 100%. I think it's one of the hardest parts of spiritual development because ego grabs a hold of us and just decides, no, you're not going anywhere. Like you are
right.
attached to who you are, the physical life, the way you look, the things you have,
Yeah,
all these things. And most people, and this is why I think a lot of people that have NDEs come back and they have a completely transformed life is because they get to that point where it's like, well, it's done. It's like
right.
I got
Yeah,
to give it all up now. It's done. Even if I have $10 billion, it's gone and I'm going to where I'm going. And then you
yeah,
come back and you got to say, well, now what? Well, now you're unattached, right? Now
yeah,
you did it right. You did it without having that spiritual, you know, the need to die first. You were able to
right.
get to that point, but that's such a low point.
Yeah,
So I empathize with you with that. I also want to, say that to throw some empathy towards people who deal with Lyme. I don't know anything about Lyme. I don't have, I've never known anyone to have it. From what I know, it's not, it's, it's something quite harsh to deal with. But I wanted to ask you this question, and we can move into the healing process and the things that you do. Okay. Um, how much do you believe that our ailments, whether it's Lyme, whether it's heavy diseases, whether it's small ailments, has to do with our own manifestation and stress that we put into our life. Like, how much does that have to do with it?
The figure's large. So here's one thing. I've noticed that patients that I work with, sometimes they have a pre-life agreement where they're going to have a disease. Okay. So those who understand about past lives and so forth, you kind of set milestones of what your life is going to be like before you take it with your angelic team. So that's one thing. So, it sounds kind of crazy. Like, why would somebody want to have disease as a part of their life? And the reason is, from what I understand, is there is an element to suffering, and this doesn't, people are not going to like this, but there's an element to it that once you get over the suffering or get through it and realize it is a lesson or a teaching to you, and you give gratitude for it, you get this energetic boost beyond anything else, so there's a reason to it. There's almost like a formula. It's like pain, suffering, ascension. And there's a saying, pain's inevitable, but suffering is an option. You don't have to stay in the suffering for very long. And this is the point of my book, The Gratitude Curve. I got to a point where the disease turned around so much for me. I understood it was a lesson. I became grateful. So all the things I was trying to hold on to, the life I had that I liked, now, as all those things got burnt away, I was like, I like who I am now better. And thank you, whoever helped me set this up. But this was a lesson. I learned lessons from this that have changed me for the better. I couldn't have gotten here without Lyme disease. Maybe I could have, maybe it would have been something else, a car wreck or something. I don't know. But this is the pathway. And it doesn't mean you should go out seeking suffering, because there's people who do that, kind of religious zealots who are like, self-flagellation and make their lives miserable on purpose because they think they'll get a spiritual lift from that. You don't have to do, don't worry, it'll come find you. The suffering will find you. And you have the choice, once you're in that suffering mode, of how long you want to stay in it. The first thing I recommend, if you are suffering right now, is start looking for the lesson. What is it? And, I do these online group healing circles every Sunday, and I'm a trance, TRANCE medium. So I get information. Nobody comes inside my body. I don't allow that, but I start getting this information like through osmosis almost. And the guides told us during one of the sessions, there's three main lessons that you learn in life: one of patience, one of forgiveness, or one of detachment. So as they're giving me this information, I'm such a wise guy. I'm like, I can't be it. It's too simple. I'm trying to think of like ways around it. I know that's not right, but I can't turn it upside down. Patience, forgiveness, detachment. These are all your lessons that you get. So, I mean, when you come to this life, you're going to learn at least probably all three of those in some different ways. So that's what I figured out. But anyway, so that's where I ended up. I just want to say one thing about the musician stuff. So there I am. The first time I went to Brazil, I didn't even halfway know why I was there. I was so out of my mind with Lyme disease, and I went down through a tour, 10-hour flight, and they had these people. I went through a tour group who helped people go through this process. So prior to you going to see John of God, so you go into this line of hundreds of people who are there every day. And he doesn't speak English. He speaks Portuguese, so that you need an interpreter. So they wanted you to more or less give a couple of things of, like intentions for your healing, which is not, of course. So, I sit down and with them, they're like, so what's your healing intention? I said, I just got one, Lyme disease. And then, I started to get up there. They said, whoa, 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 whoa. What else? And I joke, I'm like, what, do I get 3 wishes? And then one of them just looks me in the eye and says, why stop at 3? And I was like, oh, wow. Okay.
Okay.
And I just blurted out, I would like to heal and help people with the music I write and perform. That just came out of me.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. So I go through the line, and again, all this is detailed in my book, but the experience, this is such a typical healing experience where you set your expectations up of what's going to happen. And they tell you, like, you've got to stand in the line with your interpreter. You go, you touch John of God's hand, you look him in the eye, tells you something, and then you walk away. Well, none of that happened. So I walk in, and I'm in front of him and I'm nervous, and there's literally 300 people behind me, and I didn't get to, they just like pulled me aside. I didn't look him in the eye, I didn't touch him, and I go sit in this area. And as I'm going to sit there, they say, he's helping you with your music. And I said, okay, all right. Anyway, so what happened after that? I had these miraculous healing physical things that I made me forget about the music stuff. But I went down there 6 times before I got completely. Well, actually, the first 2 or 3 times it was more about physical. After that, I went down for the ride, for the
Right.
crazy spiritual miraculous things that were happening that I was watching other people have. People with stage 4 cancer going cancer free within days. People who couldn't walk, walking away. Um, uh,
That's cool.
Spontaneous exorcisms happening. Just unbelievable stuff that I've only read about.
Yeah.
And I started getting interactions with music. That one of them, again, I write about in the book, the day after David Bowie died. I was not a big David Bowie fan. I started hearing all these David Bowie songs. Songs I forgot about, like Moon Age Daydream. Like, I forgot about that song. Why did I wake up 3 days after he died? So every day I got a new song. And the week after he died, it was like a new song. I would wake up and there'd be a new David Bowie song in my head. I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And then on maybe the 7th day, I think it was, I'm making my coffee and I hear another David Bowie song. I hear his voice. I'm like, I don't know this one. So I went down to my recording studio and grabbed my guitar and started playing. I'm like, this isn't his song. I'm getting a song. I hear his voice, and I wrote this song called Astronaut. It's basically the next chapter in the Major Tom story about
Okay.
Major Tom. He gets lost and he becomes a junkie in space, and he, never hear from him again. Well, guess what? He comes back to tell us all that we are one, to
Right.
help us with with an ascension. And so that was the song. And I wrote it, and I can't explain that song. I really can't.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I talked to another,
I wanted to jump in one really quickly just to kind of
yeah,
relate to you with that. That's fascinating that you, so I've never actually talked to anybody that's had that occur because I had a similar experience with a song I wrote called Soul Vision, which is the beginning of an ending credit song of these episodes. Okay.
mm,
And what happened with me was I had heard this song in my head and it just kept coming up. And usually for me, I'll grab a guitar and you can probably relate to this and I'll start
yeah,
playing a few chords and then boom. And, well, this is how I write. And then I actually freestyle. It just comes out of nowhere. But
yeah,
it's kind of a whole creation process. Whereas this was a situation where it was really late at night and I kept hearing this kind of melody in my head. And I thought, no, I'm going to bed. It's like 2 a.m., like, what am I doing? So I went and I'm brushing my teeth and I'm still hearing it.
yeah,
Brushing my teeth. I'm like, okay, I'm going to bed. So I go to walk up my stairs and I'm like, okay, 2 seconds. So I run to my studio. This is probably about 7, 8 years ago. And I run to my studio, I had a little studio at the time and I do the song up, I hit record, I record it, I go to sleep. I woke up the next morning and I thought, what a weird, bizarre dream. I dreamt that I woke up or I was writing this song and like just out of nowhere. And I remember I went downstairs and I thought, did that actually happen? So I run to my studio. Sure enough, it's recorded and I listened to it. And it was almost like I was in some kind of weird autopilot when I wrote Soul Vision.
yeah,
And that was the beginning of that was my first album in 2015. And then I wrote 4 albums all the way to 2020. And the reason why it's so important is because that was the real like kickoff to all my music I would write.
yeah.
And I cannot explain it. It's similar to what you're saying, where you kind of had this like feeling and you just had to do it. And then you're like, what? You're
Well,
hearing it in your head. So you know what I mean? I
It
just
gets
wanted to share
even,
that because I've never
yeah,
really shared that outside of
no,
I have music interviews, but
yeah,
yeah, it's similar.
I can, well, so it gets even more intense. So I write the song. There's a video. The song is called Astronaut. So if you, the name of the musical project I have is called The Zen Engines, Thezen Engines. And so you can look it up, Astronaut by the Zen Engines. So, the song came out. And then I started to doubt myself, like, am I crazy? Like, did that really happen?
Right.
You know? So I came upon a person again through, this is so circuitous, through people I knew in Brazil. um, I told them about the situation, and one of them said, "Oh, a friend of mine channels the consciousness of somebody who was an extremely famous rock star, 30 years ago, who's now passed. She has direct contact with him. Would you like to ask him about this?" I'm like, "Yes, let me
Right.
ask." So we asked this person, and the person, the consciousness is a smartass. So I say, the question was it David Bowie who gave me that information? And the person was like, "Greg, were you thinking about Frank Sinatra when you came up with this song?" Of course it was David Bowie.
Right.
But he said, "But don't worry, it's your song. He inspired you. He didn't write the lyrics, you did. Us dead rock stars do this from time to time. And because you are not like a fanatical fan of his, he connected with you because you weren't like polluted with ideas about him. So he inspired you to write the song. It's all yours, 100%." But he said, "Us dead rock stars, this is what we do." So I thought that was fascinating. Then this message came through: "Would you like to write a song with me?" And I was like, "What?"
Oh
um
no.
yes, I would.
That's funny.
So you understand, the person, the physical person who's still alive, and I are, we're acquaintances more or less. And this information's coming through. We're both like, "What?" So this person said, "Listen, when I was in a coma before I died, and I was in this strange place where I wrote a song, and it never got recorded. I wrote lyrics about my experience when I was in a coma because I was in this weird holding pattern consciously. And it was kind of scary. But I realized, love is the answer, and love helped me through it." I said, and he said, "The person you're talking to has the lyrics. Would you like to write the music?" And I was like, "Of course I would." And so he kind of gave me a prescription of how to get this music going. And so it was one of those things where, a week or so went by and nothing happened. And then I woke up in the morning. It seems like how it comes to me. I woke up in the morning hearing a line of a song, and I was like, "Was this from a TV commercial like in the 80s or something?" Like I'm hearing this da 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 da. Like, what is that? And because it was so familiar, it sounded like something else. So I didn't pay attention to it for maybe 4 days, but it kept bugging me. So finally, like you, I get my guitar, and then this entire song comes out. And I hadn't heard from the woman. She was supposed to send me the lyrics. So you as a musician will appreciate this. Like the moment I finally said, "I've got this song more or less written. Where are the lyrics?" She sends me the lyrics, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, here they are." And then she said, "Do they fit?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't even think about that." It would be an impossibility for lyrics to be written and
Right.
it fit right into the song. That's like
Uh-huh.
astronomically impossible.
Right.
But they did.
They did.
They
Wow.
fit. How the heck?
So it
So
went along. So the lyrical, because I do a lot of voice work with people as well, and a lot of
yeah,
times they'll write a song, they have a melody over top of an instrumental, and then they
yeah.
give me the lyrics, and I go, "This isn't working. Like we're gonna have
No.
to work this a bit." So basically, the lyrical, you know, piece of the song fit exactly with the melody movement.
Yeah.
Wow. So the
Unbelievable.
syllables, everything were just like in alignment.
Everything I had to move two lines. I repeated them to
Right.
there was just one part of the song where it was like minor adjustment, but it was
Right.
almost 100% fit.
That's
So
wild.
that was amazing. Um, and so that song's out there. And then on my Zen Engine's website. And then another thing happened in Brazil, where it was the last time I was in Brazil. And the day I was leaving, this whole thing came through. I'd been going to Brazil so many times. My young daughter was getting upset by it. Like, I'd be away 2 weeks at a time, and I would come back. And then the last time, she didn't even want to talk to me. She was like so upset by it. The guides were giving me this information, like, you can write this song about you never leave. Like, your energy's always with her. She's always in your heart. You're always in her heart. So I'm standing there in this area, this healing area, getting this information, and tears are just coming down my face. I'm like, how am I ever going to write a song like that? This is too personal. And they're like, well, it's already started. I'm like, okay. So I get home, and I'm still working the corporate job. I'm working from home that day. So our internet goes out, which at the time, that didn't happen. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll try to start writing this song. So this is what I know what you mean about you feel like you're removed from the situation, because I felt something go in me, in my heart, my chest. I felt this warmth go in my chest. And I started writing this song where I would write like 2 lines. I would burst into tears,
Mm,
like there's no way. And then I would write it down. I'm like, all right, that's amazing. What's the next one? And then 2 more lines, like, oh my God. And I write that down and cry and then revisit it. And then I recorded it. So my voice doesn't even, it sounds different than my voice now. So
yeah.
I kept those on the song. It's called I Will Remain is the name of the song. And it's a song about us. And anyway, that was extremely moving. And for years I couldn't really play it live, because I would choke up in the middle of singing it, but I finally can now.
I have a
But
few of
that's
those myself too. When you're
yeah,
so emotionally attached,
yeah.
and you have to revisit it, that type of thing.
Oh, early on, I couldn't even talk about it. I couldn't
Yeah.
even say one of the lines. I would just be like, all right, give me a minute. Hold on. Sorry.
So you can probably relate in the idea that, because I've always said music is something that seems to be bigger than us. There's something to it. Whenever I hear an NDE, because I talk to so many people who've had passed, they passed on and come back kind of thing. Whenever they talk about music, I'm just like, what? I just
Yeah,
want to know all about it,
yeah,
because I feel like there's got to be something to it. I think it might be one of those gifts that we were given to bring over, and some of us can channel into that
yeah.
in a way that you're bringing it over from the other side. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah. As a friend said to me years ago, when we were listening in his house of some music I'd written and playing it through the speakers, and he's an artist. And I was saying, he said something like, "This is amazing what you're doing. You're a musician, and we're listening to your creation." I said, well, I know, but I look at your creations and they're amazing too. He said, but you're changing the air. I was
Right.
like, yeah, that's true. Because it's the vibration.
Yeah.
And isn't it amazing? We as human beings can become an instrument by singing. We vibrate. That's why chanting is so big. That's why music is so big, and especially indigenous religious and spiritual situations. You you change your vibration. And in fact, maybe you'll relate to this. So this next record that I'm writing, I'm recording at 432 kilohertz instead of the 440. Maybe you're already there. You're already doing that. But I've changed it, and I've noticed my guitar sounds different. My acoustic guitar sounds different. It rings better. So I'm experimenting with the
Yeah.
frequencies now.
I haven't done this. I've been hearing more and more about the 432 kilohertz, just changing the tuning a little bit. I coach also. Another hat I wear is I coach musicians and singers for a living, and there's a few that I coach chanting with. Like we do chanting as the mode of the singing practice we do on a weekly basis. And there are some days where I'm playing the guitar and I start chanting with my student, and because I'm a very spiritual person to begin with, I find I get very lost in it. It's something I'm trying to work on, where I think, how do these, because I mean, I look at myself as I mean, I'm a professional musician, but I would think if I was touring and putting on chanting events and doing 20-minute songs at a time, um, there are times where I literally feel like I'm about to pass out. I will be in this chant and I'm gone. I'm no longer present. Like
Yeah.
I'm in this, it almost feels like I'm engulfed in this relaxed state. And I'm like, oh, I have to keep playing and I have to keep singing. So how do I? So what a challenge that can be, because you are that person, that instrument that's putting that energy out there for people to feel,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
going
So
into trances through dancing and singing and chanting, people have been doing that for a long time.
I
So,
know. It's so wild how we can start. I mean, you said you started out in the grunge era, kind of rock, heavier rock, kind of like, did you say darker? Was it like darker, would you
well,
say?
most of the grunge stuff it was heavy, and it was kind
Yeah.
of like the theme to a lot of the grunge stuff was, I'm not well,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I'm
No,
angry
that's
about it.
yeah, well,
So,
Nirvana was my biggest inspiration. I was just a little guy when Kurt Cobain was out, and
right.
I listen back now to some of the music and I go, "Holy, this is pretty heavy stuff for a
Yeah.
6, 7, 8 year old to be listening to." As I was pretty young at the time, but but that was a huge influence. I loved his ability to feel, like you could just feel his, even if it was sad or
Yeah.
that emotive release that he was able to put out there. It just helped me through some of the times I had. So transitioning, the reason I asked you about why you were doing this, you went from this rocker stage to what you're doing kind of now. It's quite a transition, like
Yeah.
I still feel like I will forever have to write the way I do, but I love doing the chanting things. I love doing the spiritual work, and maybe that'll evolve over time. You might be ahead of me in that, of course. But do you find that it's difficult to get yourself into that state if you were used to writing a certain way before?
Yeah. 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 So I don't know. Maybe it's part of me that I've always liked heavy guitar stuff. Even it can be happy music, like when I was a
Okay.
little kid, like Eddie Van Halen, he was an amazing
Right.
guy. And most of their music is party music, whatever. It's happy music. And then I got into the grunge stuff and stuff like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and Nirvana.
Yeah.
What appealed to me was the power of those chords that the guitars were playing, and the angst in the voice. It really appealed to me at the time, and it was probably something part of my healing I needed to release or whatever. But
Yes.
I actually, when I had Lyme disease, I made a mix CD of all the angriest songs and the darkest songs I could come up with as a therapeutic device, and it
Mhm.
it didn't make me feel better.
No. It's interesting though, because I'm going to kind of shift back a little bit to the Lyme thing, because we're talking, you said 12 years you worked on this,
Yeah,
worked on yourself. And yet you've seen people, like you said, miraculous moments where someone can heal themselves within however much time, right?
yeah,
So for some reason in your blueprint, your timeline, whatever it was, you said, "Oh, I'm going to deal with this for 12 years." Somebody might only have a year, six
yeah,
months,
yeah.
whatever it is, but that healing journey. And
Hmm.
you talk about the listening to that grungy music, that harder music, that dark music. I don't get, I get like little ailments, and I'm really into this guy named Dr. Sarno, who, I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he basically was a doctor. He's passed away now, but he really deals with the mind body prescription, as in we have an internal rage that we dig deep into our souls, into our bodies. And what happens is when we don't want to deal with our mental emotion, with emotion of feeling whatever it is we need to feel, it has to go somewhere. That
Mm,
energy can't, it has to escape. And it
right,
can escape through ailments, disease, whether it's a serious illness, whether it's just pain and suffering. And when you're dealing with that dark energy, think about when you're a teenager and you're listening to that music you want to hear just because you're angry about things, but you don't know how
yeah,
to actually let out your emotion. So I think
right,
it is healing in a sense, but
hmm,
at some point you have to be able to release that in a different way. And
yeah,
what way, if we dig into what you do for a living with the healing stuff you do, does that correlate with this? Like, is there a
yeah,
better way for us to release our internal anger and things like that?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's those lessons: patience, forgiveness, and detachment. So a lot of times, it's forgiveness is the missing ingredient for people who are angry, people who have abused them, and in all ways. I deal with people who have trauma a lot. Now, some of that trauma isn't their fault. So a lot of it, not their fault. What do I mean by that? Trauma. you really want to get down to it. It's an agreement you probably set up prior to this life with the perpetrator and yourself, but I don't want to get into that. Some people are in the middle of their dealing with their trauma and they hear that and they say, what, you're telling me this is my fault? Like, well, everybody has a responsibility to some degree, but that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, this is not your fault in this lifetime, where if something happened to you, a trauma happened in another lifetime, how would you even know that, unless you work with somebody who can help you revisit that. So that happened with me when I started doing energy work and Lyme disease healing. I met a woman and I started doing a healing residency at a healing holistic center here about an hour away in Connecticut. And I started doing in-person sessions with this woman, tuning forks and so forth, and Reiki style healing. But the session that was pivotal for her was we couldn't meet in person. So I said, let's do a remote session. And I thought, it's not going to be as good, but it ended up being better. And so there was a lesson to me, like, oh, the body's not there to distract. Maybe you get the spiritual stuff out. So what happened was we started doing this session and I started to see, like in a dreamlike state, her face, but she had like a powdered wig on. I'm like, this is what people wore like 400 years ago in France, and I got, yeah, she's in France. This is her. I'm like, okay, what's going on? And this is how I know it was true, because it showed me a window into a lifestyle that I had to look up to make sure this is the way people lived. She was the wife, and she had a couple kids of an aristocrat in France, 400 years ago, and he died. So she had nothing. It's like she didn't have any inheritance from him. She didn't know what to do to stay in their house. So all this was getting, sold off, and she had to become basically a consort. She still had friends in that circle, and she would sleep with these men for money, basically. It wasn't like a full-on prostitution, but it was like they would pay her rent or mortgage or whatever. And so I saw that. Now, granted, this woman is Catholic. So number one, does she even believe in past lives? So I'm like, oh God. So I started with that. I'm seeing a past life. I don't know if you believe in it, but I see it. And then number two, I'm telling her she's more or less a prostitute in another life. Like, how do you like that? She took it very well. And the thing that was fascinating, she had Lyme disease, but she also had a shoulder ailment. So that was helping her with range of motion with the tuning forks. And so she had a rotator cuff tear. She didn't tell me she was getting ready for surgery. So anyway, I saw her in this other lifetime get pushed down a flight of stairs, and it broke her shoulder. I think it ended up killing her, because then she couldn't, continue doing what she was doing, and she died. So I tell her about the shoulder thing, her being pushed down a flight of stairs, and she reported to me on the phone, Greg, I'm feeling my shoulder heat up. Is this okay? I said, yeah, I think you're being healed. It's one of these things that I didn't know anything about until I read Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss, that, you can have a trauma in a past life, and all you need to do is just bring it up. Like he would bring it up in hypno sessions, and all we did, I just brought it up to her, and she had the spontaneous healing. So I didn't say anything to her about it. I said, it's nothing to be afraid of. Your shoulder's heating up. Just let it happen. So I didn't see her for another week. The next time I see her in person, she looks different, like good, like really good. And I'm sitting there having tea with the owner of the wellness center, and she comes in and she says, Greg, I got to tell you this funny story. After our session, we had that thing with the shoulder. I said, yeah. She said, well, I didn't tell you that I was scheduled for surgery, for rotator cuff surgery. And I went in like 2 days later, got a CAT scan from my doctor. He comes in back into the room with a funny look on his face. He said, what did you do? Like, there's nothing there now. We have nothing to operate on.
Wow.
Like, wow. So, the owner of the wellness center hears that. She's like, let me go get a video. I want to video. Here we go. Testimonial time. So she's going to get that. And then the patient leans in and she says, and you know what else? I don't have Lyme disease anymore.
Holy.
That was beyond my belief system even, but
Right.
she's in remission to this day. So sometimes that happens, it's not, believe me, that's a rare case. And,
Yeah.
but
But it's still a case. It's still a case. And this
it's
is
a
the thing
case.
people have to
And
also
why did
understand.
that happen? Because
Mhm.
we had no expectations. We didn't know what we were doing. We stumbled into this.
Right.
We stumbled into the past life and everything. And, I was, it wasn't because I'm an awesome, amazing person or, whatever. I was honored. I was honored to participate in that and to see that these things are possible.
Yeah.
So
And
that's why
it's
I tell the story, because it's anything is possible if you keep your expectations out of it and you just kind of just let it happen.
So I think what I'm getting from you though is to work not just, one of the disclaimers I always say in a lot of these episodes is like, I mean, we have doctors for a reason, so make sure you are consulting your doctor. Don't just try to
Sure.
have a miraculous healing without, you want to have. I think there's kind of this idea of, um, healing from the outside, but healing from the inside, and sometimes healing from
Yeah.
the inside can be that spiritual part of us that we're not putting any attention on. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to be working with healers or work with people.
You said something very important. Yes, you need to continue seeing your doctors and so forth. I've begun collaborating with physicians. Okay. In fact, I just spoke at a conference in November. It was all, a conference more or less created by Lyme doctors for other doctors. And I was honored to speak on the idea of energy healing being as an adjunct therapy to physical treatment, because I see all these cases where people get stuck or they plateau in their physical treatments. And then they're like, what? The doctor's like, why isn't this working? These treatments have worked for other people. Why is this person stuck? So you got to look at the mind, body, spirit, so
Right.
you've got the physical taken care of, the mind. What are you stressed out about something? Or is there something you're hanging on to that's blocking your healing? Do you not believe that you can get better? That can do it. Not believing that the treatment is working or that you can get better or that you deserve to get better. If you have those mindsets, I've seen that block treatment that's worked for hundreds of other people. And then, of course, the spiritual thing, like I just described, sometimes it's a wild card thing like that, where something happened to you in a past life and that needs to be just brought up and resolved. And then now you can heal. So yes, absolutely 100% agree. It's all of the things. You need to continue doing physical treatments, but it's to your benefit to look at the mental state. Are you in a lot of stress right now? Are you in fight or flight? Are you in something I see a lot of Lyme patients get in? I call it analysis paralysis, where it's like you start a treatment, but then you go out on the internet and you keep continuing doing research. Like maybe I'm not on the right treatment. You
Mhm.
don't even give this other treatment a chance, and you're like, oh, I just heard about this treatment. Maybe I'll try that, and you keep doing that, and it just unravels what you're trying to do. Just give it a chance.
Right.
Be relaxed. Take your expectations on the treatment away and just have a journey with it. I know it's an overused cliche thing, but just have an experience with it and
Yeah.
see what it has to teach you. And then that's kind of the recipe or the ingredients that worked for me. All the stuff I stumbled upon, I didn't, because I wasn't smart enough to figure any of this out, or I hadn't read about these things. Now, back then it was just like I stumbled on these things, and it was the things worked for me because I had no expectations. I was just like, I don't know what else to do. I'm going to give this a shot, and I gave it a shot, and I just and the life, some of these things worked. So
Just to sum it up a little bit is you'd gotten the Lyme disease and you went through a lot of physical treatment type scenarios, whether it was antibiotics, the injection, all these different things. But it wasn't until you got around the kind of spiritual awakening type work that really kind of helped heal you.
yeah.
And so it's important to have both. Do you ever think back and think, why did you want to do 12 years of that? Why didn't you figure it out in a year? Like, why'd you wait 12 years? Or do you see it as a benefit now? When you look back and you think, can you look at it now and see it
Yeah,
in kind of a positive light?
that's a really good question because, yeah, at the end of it, I was like, why did I go through this? And then I just kind of got a hit from my guys, like you had to go through it so you could be a cautionary tale to other people. You know, this
Yeah,
is what happens to people who stay on antibiotics for 6 years.
right.
Because otherwise, it just would have been my opinion, telling people like maybe you shouldn't go on antibiotics for 6 years. It might harm you. Well, here I don't even have to say opinion. I'll just say Here's what happened to me when I was on multiple orals, injections, and PICC lines. I did all of those. I tried them all. I went through every known antibiotic that treats Lyme disease, and this is what happened to me. You don't have to listen to me, but probably be a good idea if you at least hear what I experienced, because you might also.
Right. Yeah, no, I always wonder about that when someone goes through something, but they find they're healing, if they, have any regrets or anything. But I think it ultimately, if you change anything, then you're not who you are now. Right. So
Exactly.
it's like
Exactly.
you
Right.
look, if you're happy with where you're at now, then you think, okay, well then that was worth it, because now, you know, to me, it seems like you have a completely different knowledge set than you did then. Like you
Yeah.
weren't, you look at things from a different perspective, probably a different lens at this point. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I call these things a gift of experience. And so I'm on the other side of it now. I would not want a gift of experience of 6 years of torture from antibiotics and Lyme disease, but
Right.
I have that now. I have that knowledge. And it's like, okay, I'm glad I have it, because now, I can speak with some authority on it to other people, and just to let them know, things to avoid, things to look for. And everybody's going to, their experience is going to be different. And with Lyme disease, it's even crazier. So what works for one person might not work for another. I write a lot of blogs. I created a website called LymeKnowledge.com for those who have Lyme disease and want to listen. And it's such a wild world. So what can be a panacea to one person might be a poison to another. Literally, there's something called bee venom therapy, where people pay for, they have bees shipped to them. They get tweezers, they put the bees on them, they sting them.
Oh
And
my
some
God.
people have really powerful positive reactions to this. The melatonin is the ingredient in the bee venom that helps with inflammation and some other things that they might kill actually Lyme disease. Other people, not so much. It just helps with the inflammation a little bit. But other people can get anaphylaxis and die because they're allergic to
Right. I
bees.
was just gonna
Right.
say, but
Right.
big disclaimer. I'm putting a
Right.
big disclaimer on this part of the video, but no,
Right.
yeah, exactly. It's all different for everybody, right? So
Right.
I can understand that. That's
So
your point.
that's the whole thing with Lyme disease. I would say any other chronic illness is just, you know, don't, if somebody says this worked for me and it didn't work for you, you don't have to go respond to them and say, yes, did not work for me, therefore it
Right.
doesn't work for anybody else, because it's not true.
Yeah. I think it can be really difficult, especially with all the information out there now. People get so confused. I think probably my advice to people, I don't know if you agree with this, is to follow your that internal gut instinct of what it is you're supposed to be going after and doing. Because I
Yeah.
think we get lost with that. So that's why everything kind of leads down to that, becoming still and quiet
Yeah.
and really trying to understand what is it you need. I mean, you clearly did that, went down a path of healing. And, I would assume that other people can do that. They just have to listen, right? They
Yeah.
have to listen to what they're feeling. Did you, or I should ask, where, if people want to, talk to you or work with you or anything, is there like a best area to get connected with you online?
Yeah. Yeah. So my name is Gregg Kirk. It's spelled Greggkirk. That's my website, greggkirk.com, Greggkirk.com. You can reach out to me there. That has everything, the books I've written, even the music I have. My, we didn't even talk about it, but it doesn't matter. But, I've been a writer. I owned an entertainment magazine in the Delaware, Philadelphia area for years. And so I've got a writing background if you're interested in any of that. But if you're a Lyme patient, you can go to Lyme, Lyme, recoveryclinic.com. And that's my website, where if you would like to, I do $100 consults via phone or in person. We can do a full workup. I'm not a doctor, but I'm a health coach. So we can do that. I also do events on the greggkirk.com website. I do online group healing circles for $20. So I get groups of people together and we do this via Zoom. We do a channeled meditation. So yeah. And like I said, there's a website I put together with other Lyme patients and some doctors called Lyme Knowledge, Lyme knowledge.com. So if you're a Lyme patient and you just want to, maybe you're newly infected, or maybe you feel sick, you might think you have Lyme disease. It's a good website to go to just to kind of figure some things out. There's a blog on there, but there's a lot of really good, solid information about, the differences in Lyme disease is it's early detection, early onset that you can cure with 4 to 6 weeks of antibiotics. If you catch it in the first 60 days, you're not going to get deathly ill. But if you don't catch it in the first 60 days, and like me, I never found a tick on me and I started having the symptoms. This is more of a common situation with chronic Lyme. And we'll go into all that on lyme-knowledge.com. So that's the ins and outs of how to reach out. I'd love to hear from people. And of course, if you're interested in the spiritual stuff, Wendy Rose Williams and I do this podcast every month called Waking Up Spiritually, and we get into all kinds of spiritual things that have happened to us, and information. There's a lot of stuff going on right now with the sun, the Schumann resonance, lunar eclipses, solar eclipses. People are feeling things.
Right.
Things are changing right now.
I've really appreciated you talking. One thing I love is that you have dealt with Lyme doctors, and that I would love to see a day, in my own future, when spirit, mind, body, physical, it all comes together, because I think for so long we tend to go one way or the other, and
Yeah.
it's good to combine it all, because so that we can really kind of get it from all angles. And I think people have lost that kind of art. One of the last things I always ask every single guest I have, and it's a heavy question, but I ask everybody, and it's the first thing that comes to your heart, is why are we here?
We're here, from what I understand, to have the experience, um, to live, to live to experience being a human being. But during the course of that experience being a human being, I feel like part of it is to remember who you really are, your consciousness connected to the higher source. And the more, that's where I'm at now. So I spent the first 3/4 of my life being very human. I think I did a pretty good job of that. Failed in a lot of ways, but I'm sure that's part of it. But now it's like I'm trying to feel what's my other purpose here? Is it and trying to communicate with my guides and have that experience. So waking up spiritually is I believe it's an opportunity and for everyone. So that's it. I mean, I'm a big fan of the book, the book series, The Law of One, channeled information, and the beings who came through to the channelers back in the mid-'80s. They said the purpose of life is to live life and to help the creator know itself. The creator being God or whatever you want to call it. But the thing is, we're all aspects of God. So we go through this own microcosm of getting to know ourselves, and that helps the creator know itself. So that's kind of the wonk, the wanker, metaphysical thing that I really believe true to my heart. But I think it's just also something as simple as, I think we're here just to have this experience, to go through it, to learn lessons, to overcome things, to open up our energy, and to keep getting better.
I agree with it. I agree with everything you're saying. I think the experience is the reason why we're here too. But it kind of goes the same thing. To experience, to help our creator experience. It's
Yeah.
like we're experiencing for ourselves, but also for what is greater than us, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks so much for being here today, Greg. It's been awesome. I knew that I always say the direction goes in the direction it's going to go, and I thought it was great. I always encourage everybody that's following, and we've had a big surplus of subscribers recently. So thank you for that. Please like, share, and subscribe so we can keep getting these messages out and these great stories out to people. So thanks so much, Greg, for being on the show today.
Thank you, Joe. It was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So